Ollie. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
It's so good to talk to you again. This is my little
I,
boy. You've met him before as we're all working from home. I thought
that's
it
right.
makes sense to have him here at the beginning. He wants the lights turned off. The artwork in the back is all his. Every day we've got a new masterpiece. I think it's expressionist art. So we've
I,
made that.
I like it. I like his use of white space. He's got some synergy there for sure.
My wife let me hang a banner in the dining room, so God bless her. It's working out really well. You want to head upstairs for your nap? Okay, here you go. Thank you for doing this. We had such a good discussion last time and got such good feedback about the dialogue that this seemed like a good time to come back together and talk about this brand new world that we're living in.
Yeah, absolutely. There's never been a better time, I think.
Yeah,
What a weird space we're in right now.
it is. We didn't talk that long ago. We did this great interview. You were nice enough to invite me on your podcast. My mom has shared that interview with all of Sackett's Harbor because you gave them a nice shout out at the beginning of it, which was awesome. So you're very popular in the upstate New York region of our country right now.
Good to know. I might need to head up there soon. So Sackett Harbor,
Got my Sackett's
I'm your
Harbor
girl.
from Callaway's gift shop. And then we had this wonderful District of Conversation dinner, like a month and a half ago, where we had 140 kind of change makers from around the world in one room talking about what we were going to do to change the world. And it was this wonderfully empowering evening. And that seems like distant everything now, doesn't it? Completely
For
different world.
sure. For sure. And I'm even more grateful for that time now, and I came out away from that dinner just like really overwhelmed and impressed with how many amazing people, who all have this like common theme of wanting to do better for people and connecting people in all these different industries. And I was so impressed by that and just really inspired. And then now, especially now, it's like, man, we really have to like reach down and lift people up and connect all these amazing people even more so that all these people in all these different positions and places can actually work together to solve some problems.
I was talking with John Drew this morning, who is our co-host that night. He runs the Ronald
Hmm.
Reagan Building International Trade Center and a bunch of other stuff. And we were talking about how so many of those relationships that we make and the people we meet, it's in these moments of true crisis when you find how many of those connections have value to everybody, but you wouldn't know it unless you were in this moment, right? Where we're connecting
Right.
authentically and as humans and with no agenda, just everyone trying to get through and survive this. It's
Yeah.
amazing how often that comes to play. And that's really one of the things I was excited to explore today. I think uniquely in the position we sit in at Link as a social impact firm, we've been spending our 18-hour days. It's remarkable, really, as everything is shut down, how there's still no lack of things to focus on. I think we're working harder than ever right now. But when you look at the things we work on, we're talking with private sector leaders, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, government leaders at the municipal level, the local level, the federal level, and everywhere in between. Everyone is 100% focused on their piece of solving this, which is needed and essential and exactly what they should be doing in this moment. But I've also noticed that there's not a lot of awareness kind of across silos and across sectors of the struggles that other people are having in this space and also the opportunities and the optimism that people are finding in this moment. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get back together and unpack some of that and just kind of share some of what we're hearing, see some of what you're hearing, and see if we can put some stuff out in the world that might be helpful in this moment. So that's the whole idea.
100%. I think it's a fantastic idea because the one thing that I love about you and Link is that you really are the link. Like you are the plug, as the kids say. Like there's not too many people in this mission-based space that are also for profit, which I think is genius and brilliant in the way that we should move, right? Like you don't have to be a nonprofit to want to like do good things and care about people, but there still needs to be like that. There still needs to be that synergy. There needs to be a connection there because if everybody's doing good things but they're moving in different directions and we don't solve the immediate needs, right? And I think before we didn't have that urgency, but we do now. I mean, we have, but not in the same way that we have right now. And I think that this is the time for you and for Link, unfortunately, to keep doing those 18-hour days because we need you. We need you to bridge that gap between all these different sectors.
Absolutely, and even the kind of for-profit piece of this, which is such an interesting one. We're a for-profit company, and we believe that you can do well and do good at the same time. But it's been really great too in this moment to see that folks can just come together and set all of the kind of business relationship aside for a moment and just do what's needed. We're doing more pro bono work than we ever have, but the reality is we also have to keep our team employed and happy and healthy because they have families. And so there is a business reality that we shouldn't be ashamed to talk about. You run a really great company. I know you've been donating huge amounts of time, but you also have a business to run. So we have to make sure that in these moments when we're focused on recovery, we're also taking care of our teams as well. But it's really been great to watch people come together and support. I think within kind of the first 2 weeks of this, we probably lost about $250,000 in real or potential revenue just off the bat. We do a lot of work in the nonprofit, hospitality, tourism, event space. None of them have any revenue right now. Some of them don't even have businesses anymore. And so we made a decision as a business that we weren't going to stop serving those clients. They actually need us more now than ever. We're just not going to bill them, or we're going to figure out some sort of trade or barter for later on. We worked out a really good arrangement with a couple of the restaurants we work with that we'll keep doing everything we were doing before with the hope of some sort of future food credit at your restaurant. So get back open, and then we'll all eat like kings when this comes back together. And in the meantime, we're not going to collect on our invoices. So I think everyone's trying to figure out what they can do in these moments.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy space, right? Like especially, I'm in like marketing and communications, and I develop like a online course product for people to build an online course in 30 days from their home. And I'm like reworking our remote podcasting options, and I've gotten some kickback. I've gotten like shamed by people on the internet for saying like, how dare you try to sell your services right now? Like, you should be volunteering. And it's like, okay, but what about my 7 employees? Like, am I supposed to volunteer their services as well? I'm supposed to ask them to continue to work and not pay them? Like, I don't think people fully understand that, like, it's not just ourselves we're caring about. It's not just even our immediate families. Like, we have staff, and I care about them too. And some of my staff is actually global. They're in India and the Philippines. And they're in even more danger than we are right now. Like, that little bit of money that I'm paying them is probably feeding their entire village for real, right? And so it's like, it's a global and a local responsibility at the same time. Like, we don't have the luxury, might not be the word, but just to stop. Like, we have to keep going. We can change the way that we're doing business, but we still have to make money because we have employees. It's a very tricky landscape to navigate for certain.
What I've been telling the folks I've been talking with across the spectrum is, it's always been important, but in this moment, we need to lead with heart. You can't ignore the business realities. In fact, you need to know them better than ever if you're trying to run an enterprise. And when I say business, I put nonprofits solidly in that space. We're asking more of our nonprofits than we ever have before at exactly the time most of their funding is drying up. The spring is a time when many nonprofits do their fundraising appeals and galas and events, which can't happen any longer. So we've taken this entire sector of the economy, told them we need you now more than ever. And oh, by the way, there's no funds coming in, but keep serving.
Keep going.
Some of the nonprofit leaders I'm talking with across the city and across the country are some of the best business minds out there because they're figuring out how to do more than ever with less resources. And we've got to hold those things up. I've been telling people, like, lead with heart, lean in, don't be afraid to give stuff away because it needs to happen right now, but also don't be afraid to charge for those services that people can pay for right now, which is very different than trying to profiteer off this. I think we're all seeing folks who, in my opinion, are too far on that side of the spectrum, seeing a huge business opportunity in people suffering, and I find that despicable, right? Like, keep your business going, but let's not use this as a moment to try and get ahead because other people are behind. Let's just all try and get through this and have some faith that if we do it as good people and we're not jerks to each other, that it's got a better shot of working out for everybody.
For sure. And I think right now it's like, because I've been seeing those posts on like LinkedIn, and it's just it's like, it's privilege in motion, right? Like that meme that says if you don't come out of this with a new skill, like you didn't lack time, you lack discipline. It's like, no, you didn't lack time, you lack privilege. That is nothing more than privilege, and it's an appalling thing. And so yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that the spin on that is like, the opportunity here is to reconnect to our roots and to work together, right? Like, I have products and I need a copywriter, right? And I can't afford a copywriter right now, but I could give them a commission split on the things that I sell. So maybe I need to be focusing locally on finding a copywriter and putting them to work. And like, we can like, I think we need to get back to the village mentality of like bartering and trading. And like, maybe we shouldn't be going to so many bars. Maybe we should be hanging out with our neighbors. Imagine that. I don't know, right? Like, I think at the end of this, there'll be a better foundation for all of us as people, right? Like globally, locally, all of that. I think it's going to be a rocky road, but I think this is exactly where we need to be headed.
We've been moving a lot of events into the virtual and online space. So we've been working with partners across the country and really around the world. Had a great call with some folks over in our Manchester, England office just recently, and everyone was doing their summit or their conferences in the spring heading into the summer. That's a time for a lot of these professional development gatherings. So we're working with them to move kind of the essence of a conference into an online space. We're having some really interesting and fun discussions with cities around the country about how to move their arts exhibitions and some of their small business stuff online where people can really profit. And when I say profit, one of the concerns I have is we're holding up all of these artists who are live streaming from their homes and they're providing all this solace in times of need, which is amazing, but we're not thinking about how we can help those artists as well who are deeply suffering right now. We're doing a project down in Brownsville, Texas, great little border town in Texas, and they're doing this thing called Serenade with the City every Saturday night where they feature a local artist who Facebook live streams from home. The city produces it on the back end in their studio. It's so professional. And then they have like the Venmo and Cash App of the artist. It comes up on the screen. So folks who are able to can send that artist a tip the same way as if they were playing live. And then between his sets or her sets, they put up PSAs from the local zoo or the Brownsville Cares website or hand washing tips. So it's become this really great community convening where everyone can benefit, right? There's a public health, there's a city need, and then it helps the artist as well. And I think we need to find more of those opportunities that are kind of win-win-win.
I agree. We were chatting a little bit last night, but I'm definitely going to turn my daily show into some sort of social impact and associate a nonprofit or a food bank to it and try to rally some donations to go directly to them that way. Because, I'm just trying to keep hope alive and keep things going and just provide some normalcy. But if I can also raise a few dollars on behalf of another organization by raising awareness and the, access point for people to actually be able to donate, why not? Right? Like maybe that's like how we need to flip these things a little bit, like help larger organizations so they can help more people. I mean,
it makes perfect sense. And, we've been pulling together lots of information very quickly on the platforms that can be used for this type of stuff, the technology that is needed or in many cases not needed. We've been doing a lot of work on how you convert in-person community engagement to virtual engagement while still paying attention to the digital divide that exists and in really interesting ways is shrinking and growing at the same time. And I'm happy to unpack that. But if there's any resources that we can share around that, I'm happy to do that to anyone listening because I know that this is a need right now. I think the digital divide piece has been fascinating, and we're seeing it a lot in the school system work we're doing. In many ways, we've made the most progress we've made in a decade or more in closing the digital divide quickly by kind of forcing everyone into a work from home and learn from home posture. It really quickly highlighted the disconnect, literally the disconnect where there were many households and families who had no connection to the internet that would allow them to do these things. And I saw a lot of schools very quickly jump in to try and fill that void. I know there are school systems like Austin, Texas, and others that are sending Wi-Fi equipped buses and parking them in different neighborhoods to beam out Wi-Fi that kids can use from home. I've seen, corporate partners like Comcast give away internet essentials for a certain amount of time. I've seen some school systems we work with have sent Wi-Fi hotspots into the home where families didn't have them. So interestingly, we're seeing the connectivity divide shrink pretty rapidly. But what's becoming even more apparent is the device divide. So even if you wire a home and you've got 3 kids in that home and 1 or 2 parents who are trying to work online and you have 1 smartphone or laptop or iPad, who gets it at what point, right? So we're seeing families really having to ration that, mom gets it for a morning call, each kid gets it for an hour of schooling. So we're setting up these really interesting and almost impossible challenges. And I think as we think about, smart cities and connected cities and all this stuff we've talked about wiring and making sure people have access to information flow, we've really not talked about the device divide in that. And this is really making it apparent. I think we're going to have to think about that quite a bit and pretty quickly.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the new wave of like tablets, smart tablets, and like Chromebook type devices that maybe are like $100, but they get the job done because it's just like web-based stuff. It doesn't need a lot of processors because especially the kids, they don't need a lot like to do these Zoom calls. I mean, actually, most adults, right? Most people, I should say, really only need a web browser based device, right? Like most people are not like doing architectural designs or heavy graphic design or editing movies and stuff like that. And if you are, then you probably already have that equipment. But for just the digital divide you're talking about, which is, fascinating. I didn't even think about that honestly until until you mentioned that. And yeah, that's super real. That's again privilege in full effect, right? We just assume everybody has a smartphone in their hand. And that is absolutely not the case, right? So like we have to account for those things and then provide a solution, because all the Wi-Fi in the world doesn't matter if 3 people need to use that device at the exact same time.
Right. It's all the vast majority of Americans have some sort of cell phone or smartphone in their home. But even if you have that, if you don't have a data plan that allows for streaming, your kid doing homework jacks your bill in a way that you can't pay any longer. So I think
Right.
I think some of us have been aware of some of these challenges for a long time, but it takes something like this to kind of put it at the forefront and say, if we're really serious about this and we were able to deploy this level of technology within 2 weeks, why can't we do that outside of a crisis? And I think we're seeing that across the spectrum. Things that probably would have taken another decade to get people comfortable with. A good example is telehealth, right? There's been telehealth abilities for a very long time, but it wasn't the way most Americans received their care. But now most doctors' offices won't see you in person unless you do a telehealth visit first. So very quickly, we've re-engineered an entire industry to suddenly be comfortable with what telehealth is. In many ways, I think that could be a very helpful thing going forward, because it's going to shrink some of that access. And I'm not a medical professional. The last thing I'm going to do is try and prognosticate or give out medical advice. I think that solidly has to be left with the scientists, and I think we're learning that more and more. But I've been looking a lot at some of the city data about who is dying from COVID, and it's disproportionately Black people and people of color. And I'm not going to get into the health reasons why that is, but a lot of it comes down to access to care. Who's getting tested? It's disproportionately not Black people. They generally have less access to healthcare in their communities. We got to start addressing that, right? If you're in a town where the Black population's 13 to 15% of your population, and they're 30 to 50% of the deaths from COVID, let's wake up people and start addressing some of what's going on behind that. So I think this is taking a lot of those societal things that we talk about sometimes and really putting a spotlight on it. We were talking with a group earlier this week or last week. It all kind of blurs together now around incarceration and mass incarceration, and a lot of the states and jurisdictions who've been going to compassionate release or releasing non-violent drug offenders. I use quotes on that because every state and jurisdiction qualifies them differently. So I fear a little bit that by labeling certain people as violent and non-violent, we're making it really easy to be okay with some things and not other things. But setting that aside for a second, one of the data points that I found fascinating is that the majority of the inmates who've been released under compassionate release have been white, and the majority of the prison population is not. So again, we have to do a lot of work to figure out why that is, but I think we can make some assumptions, and it's going to be really interesting to really struggle with those as a society now that the data is right there in front of people's faces that probably haven't thought about that before. So.
For sure. Well, especially here in Washington, D.C., right? Like when you look at like Ward 7 and Ward 8, and there's like one grocery store to serve 68,000 people. And if you're pregnant in Ward 7 or Ward 8, there is not a place for you to have a baby. You have to literally cross the river. So if you are, if you are having your baby during rush hour, it's questionable. And so there's, like, how did we get here? And maybe we don't need to focus so much on like, how do we get here? But like, how do we get out of here? Because like we boiled the cabbage and the bugs have floated to the top, and we gotta clean this quickly because it's just inhumane. It's unacceptable. And it's unfair, right? It's just really unfair. And I think now more than ever, it's time to fix these problems so that we can move forward in a way that everybody is cared for and everybody has an opportunity to feed themselves, to go to a doctor, to get out of jail. And then even if, I'm working on another project actually talking about people who are like coming out of jail during the time of coronavirus. Like you talk about like trying to adapt back into society, and now everything is shut down. You can't even get a place to live. I mean, it's just really insane. But the stories of resilience also that are coming out of that, like people that have been in solitary confinement, people that have been locked up, and now and how they dealt with that. And so those people, that are coming out under these situations, like hold the keys to our success as far as like actually getting through this, like the ultimate story of resilience there, right? And we have so much to learn from them, and yet we're not taking care of those people at the same time. And so yeah, there's a big shift coming that's overdue.
just from talking to a lot of folks who are leading this in the nonprofit space and the advocacy space, I think there's a real fear that when we do come out of this, understanding the world's going to look completely different and normalcy is going to look very different. A lot of the gains we may have made in a lot of these issues are going to be set back pretty significantly. And I think that's something we all just have to be aware of. If this was an important issue going in, it's an important issue coming out, and we're going to have to really struggle hard with how to prioritize that. As we talked about on our last podcast, I was proud to be the chairman of the Greater Washington Urban League here in DC. And I know from calls with President Lambert and his team and the board over there, the organization was supposed to have its gala last week, I think it was supposed to be, and the money from that funded a lot of our operations, and the need is greater than ever, and they're making it work, but it's really, really hard, and we've got to kind of keep a focus on that. The other thing that I think has been really interesting is who structurally has been stepping up in these moments. I think we're getting a really good societal understanding of the role that schools play, even beyond education. I kind of joked, but not really joked, that after this is all done, teachers and support staff should immediately ask for a raise, because anyone who's at home with their kids and trying to do the homeschooling understands that teachers should make a hell of a lot more money in these moments. I know, like, my mom's a cafeteria worker in the school where she is, and the school there and the leadership there have been doing a really great job of taking care of their people. But it's a scary moment when you're trying to have school officials step in and fill a societal need. On some of the food programs, I think we saw schools across the country really step up and say, we know that when our schools close, an essential safety net is not going to be there for our families. And so you saw a lot of school systems go to home delivery of meals or pick up for school meals. We're now seeing the reverse of that. And some of it was initially, there was some unclarity on if the federal government was going to reimburse for weekend meals or certain amounts of meals. That's now been clarified. It looks like there will be reimbursements for it, which is great. But you're seeing a lot of the schools who have their frontline cafeteria and service workers are the ones who are getting sick now, right? And so how do you balance the safety and security of the staff that you're responsible for with the community need at exactly the same time? So we're already seeing it, and I fear we're going to see more of it, where you see schools stop that kind of feeding program because they're just not equipped to run at that level. And so then who fills that gap? Austin, Texas, again, I mentioned, they're doing some really cool things with grocery stores who have donated gift cards, because grocery stores are one of the few industries who are not seeing their profits fall as much as everyone else in this moment. And so down there, there's the grocery stores like H-E-B and others who've given gift cards that can be given out to families, et cetera, who might be able to fill that need. So I think you're going to see some creativity coming out of this. But it's also redefining how we look at essential workers. Our essential workers right now are grocery store workers and delivery drivers and folks who, had to fight for every penny and every minimum wage and all that other stuff. And I'm going to work hard not to keep this political, but it's amazing how the folks who we didn't put a lot of societal value in before this, in terms of who should be compensated for what, are now the people keeping literally our country and many of us alive. And I think we've got to remember that coming out of this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I saw a post this morning from a friend of mine who works at Costco, and she was just like, I'm scared, I'm scared. Like, I'm scared, not just for myself, but for my coworkers. I'm scared for my mom, who's an obstetrician, but now she's, or optician, she's now working in the warehouse. Like, I'm scared, like, I'm worn down, and like, I'm just scared. And that's so, important to acknowledge that, this is scary. Like, I'm afraid to leave my house, straight up, right? And I know that's not really logical, but like, I am. And so, we have to really kind of shift how we're thinking. And I think that we're going to put a lot more value into survivors, right? Which I think is where we really should have been putting our value for a long time, is the people who like get up, right? With and without the sun every single day. They do it and they survive. And I think that the people, the antibodies and the people who have been tested and already had it, who have a little immunity, are literally going to be the people that save us, right? Like, we're going to have to replace some of those frontline cafeteria workers with someone who's already gotten the virus, been sick and healed. And there's going to be a whole, like, that's going to be a new box on job applications. Like, are you, do you have the antibodies? Because we might have to like disperse whole new waves of frontline workers with people who have recovered, because if not, like, we're just spreading this virus even more by trying to feed people, right? And then we're back to where we started. So I think it'll be interesting to shift this value from money, wealth, power, perceived value, status, how big your house is, and more like what did you do? right? Like Bob Marley's quote, like, who you are, where you stand in the struggle. And I love that. Like, what are you going to do? When it goes down, like where are you going to be? Like, where are you going to find yourself? And I think that is really going to define who we are as a nation moving forward.
I agree. And really as a world, I think for anyone who may have believed that, your sphere of concern ends with your household, your city, your state, your country, this shows that that's not it. We are connected in ways that we should know and are becoming completely apparent now. And we got to remember that we're all part of this global society. We all have a role to play. I think we're also going to have to wrestle kind of from an urban and city planning, or really even a community planning standpoint, with some of the things that we've held out there as the cure-alls. And this is certainly not me trying to backtrack at anything sustainability related or walkability or any of that, but we've spent decades telling people that the way to live in a city is to get rid of your car and rely only on public transit. And in this moment where public transit is being shut down across the world for all of the right reasons, the people who we need to get to the hospitals as nurses and the frontline workers in grocery stores can't get there, and they can't afford a $70 rideshare ride, and they don't have cars because we've told them you don't need them because cities aren't built that way. We've just got to think about what this means in these moments where the system stops working the way it was intended. And that doesn't mean everyone needs to get a car. It means we have to think about how we keep essential services running. And I think a lot of local leaders are doing a phenomenal job with wrestling with this. And there are no easy answers in any of this, but the more we learn from them. The other thing that I've been really interested in is kind of some of the supply chain stuff we're seeing. So we do a lot of work with restaurants who are just facing, catastrophic situations right now. But some of them have really kind of retooled their model. We're doing some work with Farmers Restaurant Group that owns the Founding Farmers restaurants in the DC region, Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. They have turned, as of now, and they're working on others, 2 of their restaurants into kind of bodega-style grocery stores where they can now deliver meats and cheeses and milks and eggs and prepared meals and cocktails and all that other stuff, because there was this really interesting realization, I think, for many people that the supply chain for grocery stores and the supply chain for restaurants are often very, very different. Where people are getting their supplies for those 2 things are often very different. So if you close down restaurants, you're taking a huge part of the supply chain off the table when we all need it. And I think it's really amazing to see some groups pivot and find some innovation to get out there and do something a little bit different, which is going to be interesting. I think we've all seen the toilet paper shortages, and there's been a lot of writing on this, but I'm learning a lot more about supply chains than I ever did before. Commercial grade toilet paper and home toilet paper are 2 completely different products, and they were manufactured very differently. So it's not like you can just turn one off and turn the other on. That's why you saw a shortage all at once of things like toilet paper. And I'm seeing it in the place where I grew up, in Sackett's Harbor, and that whole area up there. You have at one point everyone wanting milk, and people buying more cheese and dairy than ever. And you have farmers who have no place to sell their milk because of some of the supply chain disruptions. So you have farmers literally dumping some of the milk they have nowhere to put. At the same time, people want more dairy than ever before. So we're going to have to look at all those supply chain things as we come out of this. I don't have all the answers, but I think by elevating them, we have to make sure people understand that those are some of the issues we have to figure out.
For sure. Well, there's so many problems with our food supply chain right now, like how we send our chickens to China to get processed and then back, or pigs, or like, I don't know how we got in this mess because I'm not smart enough to understand like how that makes financial sense. But you're right. Like, I think we have to, like, one of my favorite mantras is use what you have, right? And what do we have? We have Amish farmers all around here. We have supply chains for restaurants. We have opportunities, and so like I work with this company that helps me manage my Airbnb, and so she manages a lot of them around the area. So right now she's trying to flip because all the Airbnb, everything got canceled. So now we're trying to house some like first responders, and she has like a co-op type situation. And I'm like, well, do you deliver to Anacostia? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, I got to figure something out here, because there's this like 8-page list of stuff you can buy: eggs, grains, rice, spices, plants, like all kind, like charcuterie boards. Like you can go from one, and like there's things for $1 on that list, and there's things for $200 on that list, depending on where you want to be. But like, how do we get that to Anacostia? How do we set up, because like they don't have what they need over there right now at all. So how do we fix that, right? Like how do we get that milk from those farms to like Ward 7 and Ward 8 in particular? Like I know there's a lot of moms and babies over there that need that milk and can't maybe afford it right now, but they need it. So yeah, I think it's just time to retool all of that, right? Like why are we, I think more people are going to garden, more people are going to plant foods. I think that's great. I think more people are eating healthier. Maybe not all, we might not be totally there yet, but we're getting there. People are a little bit more aware of what they're consuming, where it came from. All of that. I think it's good.
All of those things. I still eat ice cream most nights because that just helps me cope right now. But I think we're all figuring it out as we go. But the societal impacts of all this, I think, are going to be long term. I think we're starting to talk about them, and as we're doing work in the social services space, and we're doing work with city agencies across the country and nonprofits who are really on the front line. There's a lot of stuff that you can't socially distance and still be as effective as you need to. Like, we still need foster homes right now. We still need foster families right now. We need to recruit more people into that pipeline now more than ever. It's really hard to do that in the middle of this, right? You see a lot of child and family welfare agencies across the country moving to virtual check-ins, et cetera, which are great, but there are still situations where you need to be in the home. And so we still see people going out and doing that level of service. And I think we really have to uphold the folks who are serving that critical mission. We did a lot of work in some previous projects on things like the Veterans Crisis Line and the Suicide Prevention Helpline and things like that. And you're seeing statistics just probably not surprisingly, but still really shockingly going through the roof. 100, 200, 300% increases in calls to crisis lines and suicide helplines in this moment. I think we're really going to see some mental health needs coming out of this that we can't wait for this to end to start addressing. We've got to start addressing them now. I also think what we're focused on with a lot of our partners is there's going to be a wild disconnect between the data that we have and the reality on the ground. And so as much as we need data to make really good decisions, what do you do when the data doesn't tell the right story? And I'll give you an example of that. If you look at reporting nationwide and in some jurisdictions over the last little bit in terms of the number of calls around child abuse and neglect, in many places, the calls have gone down significantly. That's not terribly surprising, as most people are staying at home and it's harder to be aware of what's going on if everyone's at home. But at the same time, we're seeing really troubling in many spots the number of children being admitted to the ER or even child mortality going up for child abuse and neglect related things. And it makes me angry, it makes me sad, but the data is saying one thing, the reality is saying something else. So as we know that, how do you stage interventions now, and what do we need to do to provide wraparound support for families as we come out of this? And there are no easy answers to that. I talked to a high school principal last week who is FaceTiming into the home almost every evening to talk to parents and students to make sure that they've all got a little bit of a release valve just to talk about their day. It also gives some awareness onto what families are struggling with right now. And, our school leaders have done that in one capacity all their life, but this is a whole nother level of burden we're putting on each other. And I posted something on my Facebook page the other day around some stuff that's happening abroad and starting to happen here, where there's been the spreading of code words that if you're someone who's in an abusive relationship and you're out at the grocery store or you're at a pharmacy and you need help, the one that I think they were talking about in France and Spain, you say mask 19. And if you say mask 19 at any pharmacy or grocery store, that is a sign that you need some help and the police will be called. I think there's some of the really creative stuff that's coming out that's all in the realm of like, let's find ways to communicate and check on each other. Even though we're distant, we're still more connected than ever. And I hope some of that stuff will last way beyond the work we're trying to do in the short term.
For sure. And I think it's really important to, I try to encourage people on my Facebook to like take a day off and like just be aware of what it is that you're posting, and like just understand that like some people might be like under this heavy weight and about to break, and your article or your commentary or your political whatever like might be what breaks somebody, right? And there's plenty of people who are alone right now. They there's so many aspects, right? You could be alone and just terribly, terribly lonely. You could have family members who are dying and sick. You can't get there. You might be in the hospital yourself. You might be in abuse. Like, I feel like everybody is under this tremendous amount of pressure and stress right now, and just like sadness, because it's this being in limbo. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, and that's scary. But like, we have a lot of life left on us. Like, we will be okay. It will be different. But we will get through this. But like, you are part of the ripple, right? Like, we're all in the same pond together, and everything we do is a ripple. And some people are on the shore, and that ripple is going to be a wave, and you might push them down. So like, really think about, like, on a personal level, like, what are you saying on Facebook? What are you posting on? Are you shaming somebody? Are you like yelling at Nancy Pelosi or Trump or him? Because they're not reading your Facebook posts. Like, they're never going to see it. You're just yelling at your friends. And so just really take an inventory. Like, what are you posting, and how are you helping? Because some people are like literally out at the shore, like struggling and grasping for air. And so just even on a personal level, try to put some positive energy out there. Try to post some solutions. Try to maybe focus today on not what's wrong, but like how you can solve a micro problem in your own community. Like, do you have some extra money? Maybe we should get a fund going to buy food from these Amish people and then take them to Anacostia. Like, let's focus on some solutions today and not on the problems, because I think that we're all overwhelmed by the problems that we can't control.
No, and it's natural that we're going to focus, and the news is going to focus, everybody's going to focus on what's wrong. And at some level, that serves a public health need to make sure people are taking this seriously. But we can choose how we're contributing to that discussion. And I think more than anything, we can choose not to shame in those moments where we don't have full situational experience, right, or understanding. I posted way back at the beginning of all this that like social distancing does not mean we are less connected. In fact, it means we're more connected than ever before. And I posted things like, listen, if you see someone going to work, let's not make the assumption that they are choosing to go to work. Maybe they have to go to work and they're scared like everybody else. Think about the janitors and the cleaners who are cleaning our schools and our hospitals. Do you know how terrifying that is? Right? You've got to give people the space to process this in the way that they're going to process it. If someone's got a cart full of groceries, now maybe someone is hoarding and they shouldn't do that, but more likely they're buying for their local school backpack program like my sister leads in upstate New York, or they're buying for that elderly neighbor who can't go to the grocery store. We got to give people a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Now, you know, I don't give a lot of the spring breakers who pack the beach the benefit of the doubt, but I think in general, we've got to give people some benefit of the doubt that we're all trying to get through this together. And the more we can do that, the better. But I think we're all learning about the pressures that everyone are under every day, that by putting on, in my case, a suit and a tie and going to work, it's really easy to act like those aren't there. But now when we're spending all day in each other's homes, and our dogs and our cats and our kids are all having their freak out moment at the same time. And you have to, you know, right before this call, when I first got on with you, I was a little frazzled. I had 2 conference calls going simultaneously in my ear. I was feeding my son because my wife, who's also working full time, had a call. At the same time, there was some yard work going on outside of our window that was really, really loud. And I was supposed to be in this pristine home studio setting to do this. That was all happening at once, right? And I think we're all doing that every day. And hopefully that'll give people an understanding that life is complex and complicated. And that's okay. Yeah. We got a lot more of it, right? I'm the 3-piece suit and a tie guy. And, you know, I was really proud of myself for putting on real pants to do this interview today, right? And we're all adjusting what it means to work in this new reality. And we have to have some empathy for each other.
For sure. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but I read every single one of her books last year, and it definitely helped to make me a better person. And the biggest takeaway was that just assume everybody is doing the best that they can. And ever since I wrapped my brain around that, I've become a much nicer person in general because, well, you know, you get so frustrated, and then you just have to say, hey, man, they're doing the best they can. Like, just ease up. Like, some days I'm doing the best I can too. And some days it doesn't look like very much. Some days it's very little. Sunday, I woke up, I had 14 things to do on my to-do list. I got up, I slept really good. I slept in, I got up, I made breakfast. I sat on the couch and then I fell asleep for 3 hours directly after breakfast. And I was like, you know what? I'm giving myself the day off. And that is okay. I'm doing the best that I can. And you know what? I came into Monday and today with like full of ideas about adaptation and collaboration and how to make this work and excited about things. And I haven't felt that in weeks. And so, yeah, like take a day off.
Those, right? We're going to have peaks and valleys, and we're all going to have it at different times, and that's okay.
Sometimes several times a day, right? Like, it's an hour by hour, play by play kind of a situation over here at my house, And when I'm in the zone, then I crush it, and when I'm not, I don't. And I make brownies, or I eat brownies for breakfast for the third day in a row, even though I know I shouldn't. But whatever, man.
Whatever you need to get through this right now. I think it's really interesting to figure out how teams are adapting. It's really interesting to figure out how to lead in these moments. I was asked the other day to contribute some thoughts to what it means to lead in a moment like this. And that's such a fun question because I think everyone can prognosticate and write their own thing on that. But when I really thought about it, what I came down to is leading with heart has always been important, but I think it's more important now than ever. But in my experience and in the way I lead and with the team that I have and the projects that we're working on, I'm finding that command and control isn't the way to lead through this. I said instead of command and control, we need to listen and learn. You need to listen, you need to learn, you need to adapt. You need to be vulnerable and strong at the same time. You need to tell people what you're struggling with while also helping them through theirs. You have to share as transparently as you can. I give a down to the penny update with my team weekly on where we are with cash flows and revenue and what that means for keeping people employed. And that's not to scare people. It's in fact the opposite of that. It's saying, I am thinking about this so much. I'm going to share as much as I can with you because we're going to struggle through the hard parts together. And I'm going to tell you when you need to worry and when you don't. And you're going to believe me when I say that if I'm backing it up with data, even the scary data. But that takes kind of an entrepreneur leadership of a team to come together and do that. We've found on our team, we do daily video check-ins at 11:30 every day. They're on the calendar for 20 minutes. Sometimes they're 10, sometimes they're an hour. It depends on where we are in that moment. We've also told people that we think it's important for everyone to have to come together once a day. It's a good mental check-in. But if you're not in the moment where you want to be on video that day, turn the video off, right? Let's give people some ability to not be fully projected all the time. I've also found kind of texting people individually in the off hours, especially in those moments where the day is slowed down, is where I'm able to have some of the most authentic discussions around fear and vulnerability with people I'm supposed to be leading, but often I'm looking to for leadership as well. We can have those moments when kind of the day tones down a little bit. We've also found my wife and my son and I have been hosting like Sunday brunches or dinners where we'll just open up a Zoom channel and anyone who wants to join and be in our home for the evening can come and just have that moment. And I think we need more of that. We did a Zoom call Sunday, and we had my grandmother down to my son. So we had 4 generations on there from all different places, and it was incredible. My grandma was like teary through most of the call because she didn't even know that technology existed. And we kind of had this moment of like, why did it take this for us to realize we could do that, right? Like, oh, we could do that more. I actually think my son is getting more FaceTime with his grandparents who live in Boston and upstate New York respectively now than we did before all this because we have a routine of every night we do that and they read books to each other. So I think as doom and gloom as this is, there can be some hope and optimism in how people are figuring out to stay connected. And that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, totally. I mean, same thing. It's why didn't we do this sooner? Why didn't we use this tech? I mean, I remember like when we were younger and be like, one day you'll be able to see the other person you're talking. And that was like this, yeah. And now we could do it with like 100 people, right? We could have the entire family lineage in one Zoom call, and like, yeah, it's amazing. I think it'll be good in its own way. Like I connected with my friends in Detroit last week and I was like, yeah, we'll do a Zoom call. They're like, what's Zoom? And I was like, oh, you guys will love it. And so they set up their laptop and they had it like kind of halfway across the room so I could see the two of them on their couch. And it was like I was in their living room with them, and like we had a drink, you know what I mean? And they were like, this is so cool. We got to call so-and-so and do this and have Sunday dinners. And it was like, yeah, man. And it was nice because I don't get to go to Detroit as often as I used to, right? So even just regardless of the pandemic, it was so nice just to see their faces and catch up with them like that. It was like I was right there in their living room and it made me feel better. So I think, yeah, leading with heart matters more than ever. I'm a I'm the type of person that jumps right in. People will send emails and they'll be like, "How you doing? Really nice weather. I heard about your mom." And I'm like, "Yo, like I'm not like I love you and I will do anything for you, but I'm not gonna type a paragraph about that. I just want to know where the PDF is, right?" And so I have to be careful, right? Because I don't want to come across as like a demanding or abrasive. And so it's been really good reminder for me to like always check in, like, how are you doing? Like, one of my employees is in the Philippines and like his president just announced that if you go outside you could get shot. Like, I feel like it warrants me to ask him how he is doing and if there's anything he needs from me first before I talk about any video editing or anything that I need him to do. And I think that that's a good thing, right? Like, not that I was a jerk before, but like I could, especially with work stuff, I'm popping in between meetings. And so no, being more human is always going to yield better results.
Right. And I think it's also a good reminder that we need to be checking in regularly with the people who are checking in with everybody else. I've been spending a lot of time reaching out to other people who I know are in some sort of leadership position where they're being looked to for the answers. And it's not surprising, but not enough talked about how vulnerable those folks are in these moments as well. And so just making sure we're checking kind of all around our spheres of influence and networks to make sure that people are doing okay and giving them the space not to. I talked to my team about how, these video daily check-ins are going to serve a great purpose for some people. They're going to be really annoying for other people, and we're all going to go through that cycle on a daily basis. So let's just ride it together and figure it out, and we'll get through it together. We have a guy on our team named Charlie Brotman, who we've talked about before. He's 92 years old, an amazing man, and he is locked down in his senior living community. He can't even leave his room any longer to go out and have meals with the other residents. His entire existence is his one room in the senior facility where he's living. We've been able to work with the nursing staff there to get him onto our Zoom conference calls on a weekly basis to make sure he keeps that connection. And it's serving a need for him, of course, but it's serving this huge need for our team to feel connected in that moment. Charlie, as many of you know, was the announcer for the Washington Senators before they came back as the Nationals. He announced every presidential inauguration from Eisenhower through Obama's second inauguration. So this guy's like a PR legend. And we had him on the screen on what was supposed to be opening day for Major League Baseball. And clearly there was no opening day, but we asked him, tell us your best opening day stories. And we told him at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to end with your stories. And so he spent all meeting kind of getting ready. And then we ended with the last 15 minutes was just him reflecting on JFK throwing out the first pitch and then what Richard Nixon told him in the dugout. And it was just this unbelievably human moment that gave us all our taste of baseball that day with Charlie, who was in a room somewhere, and the rest of us at our home somewhere. And I think we got to find those. And, I think I'm very aware, having been a caretaker for a number of folks in senior communities, how on the front lines senior communities and nursing homes are right now. And I think we're talking about it a little bit, but we have to elevate that every moment we get. Most of these facilities have never needed to be equipped for what they're dealing with right now. With nothing coming in and nothing going out, families can't come in, right? We're relying on the frontline staff there to keep the most vulnerable population not just alive, but emotionally and mentally cared for at a time when they have families at home who they have to leave to come care for other people. We have to be keeping our frontline nursing home and assisted living workers kind of top of mind as well and doing everything we can to support them. But Charlie Brotman, if anyone knows him, give him a call, email, let me know. I can hook you up with him. He's a good guy in these moments to be talking to.
Yeah, I've been doing this daily show and I've been asking people for like tips and tricks to like kind of just stay in a better mental place about everything. And one of my guests suggested that you take a calendar and you write a different name on every day of the month, people in your life, and then call them. Like, it's one call a day, right? Isn't that great? I thought it was really great. And like, just to kind of keep you on track, and it'll make you think about those people, and I've been doing a lot of gratitude meditation. So I've been working with like a yoga therapist person who does guided meditations with me for a few months. And one of the things that she has me do is 20 deep breaths, and it's a gratitude meditation specifically for the people in your life that you're grateful for. So the idea is that you take in a deep breath and you think about somebody. So like I would think about you and all the work that you're doing and how grateful I am that you exist and that you're in my life and lots of other people's lives. And then on the exhale, I would send that energy and that gratitude to you wherever you might be in the universe. And it's a really good way because, when you're trying to meditate, like it's a noisy space up there in my head and it's really hard to stay focused. But having like that, okay, 20 people I'm going to send gratitude towards in these 20 breaths. And you'd be amazed how much 20 deep breaths can really change your whole perspective and your nervous system and everything else. And what a cool way to kind of just keep that energy going and send it to people and think of, even if it's somebody you don't know, maybe somebody who's in a hospital right now who's scared and lonely, send them some energy and just really kind of, do anything that we can to be present and be positive and just be hopeful, right? Because like we're scrappy, man. Like, as bad as America is about a lot of things, right? We also have this like resiliency and this tenacity and this like drive for more. I mean, we all, we're the most entrepreneurial country on the map. Like we really, our origin is us leaving someplace, 100, 200, 300 years ago and saying, or 200 years ago and saying, I think there's better out there, right? Like we left our, I'm Irish, so we left because of the potato famine, but like everybody left and came here for something, right? So at the core, like we are good people, like we are scrappy, we're resilient, like we innovate, that's who we are. And so we just have to kind of get back to that with some really simple practices, right? So gratitude, helping where you can, connecting your community, reaching out to somebody. I love what you said about the personal text, because my brother will pop up and say, "Hey, Molly, how you doing?" And it makes me feel good. You know what I mean? It helps for sure. It's not somebody who needs something from me for their business or a podcast. It's like someone just checking in, and that's really, really valuable for sure.
I've also found it's helpful to give people a way to acknowledge without feeling the burden to then respond. So if I'm sending someone who I know is just, working 24 hours a day right now, I want them to know I'm thinking about me. I want them to know I'm thinking about them, but I don't want them to then feel compelled to use the 6 minutes of mental space they have to write me a dissertation back. So I'll often write this note and make sure they know I'm thinking about them, and I'll say, feel no obligation to write me back. No, we're sending love. And you can like that and know that we've heard each other. And I think we've got to give people the ability to kind of respond or not respond at whatever level they need to right now. And the more we're checking in on each other, the more we'll know. Going way back to the beginning of this discussion, we're finding with a lot of our schoolwork, a lot of school systems are having the biggest issue connecting with families that tend to be a bit disconnected, whether those are homeless families or families that don't have a permanent address or families who may not have updated their address in the school system's data systems. And so lots of efforts being done right now to kind of track down and reach out to families who at some level disappeared since all of this happened, which is terrifying to say out loud, but it's also the reality that a lot of people are dealing with right now. And we're going to solve that by looking out for our neighbors. I was talking to a person I know very, very well, a family member who was working on a backpack program, which is a program where you fill backpacks with food and send them home with the kids, and trying to figure out how to make that work in this environment. And one of the families that needed to be reached didn't have a phone, but they knew that the neighbor did, and so they were able to reach out to the neighbor, who got a note to the family. And we can't leave it just up to our schools or local leaders to solve all this. Some of it's going to take those personal connections at a community level that I'm seeing really come together. And I think that's where I keep coming back to. We need a massive federal response right now. We need a massive global reckoning of how we got to this point. And all of that has to happen. And it's got to filter down to the state level and the local level. But the recovery and the rebuilding work is going to happen at the neighborhood, the family, and the community level. And we can't forget that. As much as we're talking about stimulus, this and that, and all of it's important and it needs to happen better and faster, and I'm fully on board with all that, it's really going to take us reconnecting at the local level and remembering that the neighbors that we now talk to, we all had before this, we just never talked to them, right? It's amazing how much we're learning about our own communities as we're all home in these moments now.
100%, right? Like there's all these little like front porch parties and people playing music and people are waving at each other. And I joke about it, but I'm like, man, 3 weeks ago they would have been calling the cops on each other. Like, I can hear something outside, right? But now everyone's like, oh my God, life. Yes, thank you, please, right? And I think, I think we needed this like come to Jesus moment or whatever you want to call it. And, I feel the same way about like the political environment the last however many years and how divisive everything has been. And it has been horrible and traumatic in a lot of ways. But at the same time, we have more women in office. We have more people of color in office. Like, we have had a serious shift in how we perceive things. There's more younger people voting. Like, things are changing, right? And so somehow in all of this, right, like hopefully we come out of this like a more caring, loving, connected society. Maybe we should be bringing back block parties. Maybe we should know our neighbors. Maybe we should, I don't know, right? Like, I think that a lot of good things are going to come out of this. I think we're going to understand that we are so much more connected than we ever realized. We've always been connected. We just didn't realize it. And I think, yeah, checking in on your neighbor, checking in on their families, if you still have a paycheck and there's some kids in your kids' school that were suffering, like, find a way to help them out, right? Like, you got to take that initiative, because as we're seeing, like, even with the well-intended government bailouts, right? Like, lots of things can be well-intended and still be just not working, right? And so, when are we going to get these grants? Are we going to get these grants? Like, what does that really look like? So in the meantime, we can't just rely on the government. We have to rely on each other. And then hopefully the government will come in with these sweeping assistance. But like, in the meantime, right, like, regardless of the data, like, we know what we know, and we know when someone is in danger and when they're struggling, and there's ways to help that without making things worse.
I completely agree. And as much as I work very hard to make sure that the community building work we do is not partisan. I have my own political beliefs, and I'm not shy about them. I also don't think I have to lead with them to be an effective leader. And so in these moments, it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, we need our government institutions to be working better than ever. And we need the 100%. Right people in the positions to make these work. The Small Business Administration has an impossible job right now. I don't care what your position is, you want them to be equipped to do this well, or nothing else starts to work. So we need these moments to really remind people of the role that certain institutions have in all of our lives, without at all downplaying the reality of what it means to have certain leaders in certain times, and all those things that people will wrestle with and will grapple with and will figure out as elections move forward. It takes nothing away from the moment that we need this government to work as well as possible and better than ever in this moment. And we should all be really, really pulling for that. The other thing that I've been thinking through a lot is the role of bars and restaurants. And I really think that it's become so clear how much of community gathering places they were before this and will be after this. I think shutting down that entire part of the economy and regulating it only to delivery was needed and important and the right decision. But that industry, among all of the ones that we're bailing out in lots of different ways, is probably going to be the hardest to find a recovery for that looks anything like it did before this. And I only put that out there not to be down, but to say restaurants were operating on almost virtually non-existent margins to start with. They were employing lots of people, and all of that changed overnight. So most of the restaurants that I'm working with or know of are losing huge amounts of money on delivery, and they're doing it because they know they have a community role to play. Think about that, right? They're losing money to keep operating because they know we need them in this moment. We got to remember that when we get back to work. We got to tip our delivery drivers now as well as we can, and then come back out and support those folks who have been there. And let's not hold grudges against those who can't do that, because it's really hard to operate a non-existent profit margin in this environment. We've just got to be there for that industry and remember how it brings people together.
Well, and it's like we were talking about, like, the community, right? Like, no shade, but like, maybe we need to not do DoorDash and Uber Eats and all those. And maybe people who are good at like strategically mapping stuff or setting up delivery routes should be reaching out to restaurants and saying, hey, let's take cause like, Uber Eats takes 30%. 30%. Like, when you're operating with paper thin margins, like 30% is a kneecapper, right? Like, it's not sustainable. And I'm sure they've dropped some of their fees, but it's still like restaurants should be getting 100% of that, and the driver should be getting 100% of the tip, right? So now if you're a planner or a person that can figure that stuff out and you're chilling at home right now, like, why don't you reach out? Like, why don't we come up with some local plans to eliminate, like, no offense, Uber Eats, but like, y'all have had your hand in the pot for too long. I think we need to come up with ways for Like, are there people who have recovered from the virus that ride bikes or drive that are in your local area, and they can become your new delivery drivers or your out front people? And then how do we like eliminate, like, what do we do to get rid of the expenses? Like, how do we, like, everything has to be recalibrated, right? Like, even how are you serving this stuff? What is it coming in? Like, are you using more, like, can you just wrap everything in tin foil instead of putting it into containers and package it differently so you're not spending that money? Like, how do we cut out all those expenses and just get the money right to the people that need it? But at the same time, it is so important because it is a community gathering place. It's where people go to hear music. It's where, I mean, where else would all these Tinder dates go? You know what I mean? They'll have nowhere to awkwardly hang out with one another. So it's important, but I think it's time to just like, hey, let's not look to Uber Eats to fix this. Let's fix this like internally. Because there are people who are sitting on their couches and maybe they're furloughed, maybe they're getting paid, maybe they're not, but they're bored and they're brilliant minds. Like, let's recalibrate restaurant delivery in your neighborhood. Let's figure that out.
I think the more we can find those local options, it reminds people that the think local first of the world and the local business enterprise is so important. I think the reason I'm not kind of writing off some of the big guys and their solutions here is they were some of the ones that could quickly pivot to allow delivery to still happen. Right. But the concern I have long term is if you think about who's going to be in the best position to fill vacant retail space during the recovery, it's going to be the large guys, right? It's going to be the big national folks who had the reserves to come through this. So I want our small and local restaurants to come back, our small and local businesses to come back, but that's going to take some really aggressive planning and support to make that happen. If we leave it just up to whatever the market is, I fear that a lot of the reasons some of us live in communities with lots of local businesses is going to start changing very rapidly if the local businesses aren't there. So, I want them to come back. I want the variety of restaurants. I want the variety of shops, but we're really going to have to focus on that to make it happen because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen naturally. But I think we can get there. We've got to get through this. We've got to understand that the world we're coming back into is going to look very different in so many ways, but it's going to look very similar in so many ways too. And so hopefully in these moments, we can hold on to those things that have worked really well and we can kind of redo the things that didn't work as well. I think it was really smart that, for example, the census this year made a big focus on letting people fill out their census online way before any of this happened. And it turns out to be a really good decision to allow people to do that without sending door knockers out in the middle of a pandemic. What can we learn from that to move some of our voting into a scenario where we're not all crowding into community and civic centers in the middle of a pandemic? We've got to be able to apply common sense. And some of this will get partisan, but some of it doesn't need to. If we can't go out and we have a democracy, let's figure out how people can vote in that democracy without going out. Some of these things we just have to apply some common sense to and try and solve as a society, regardless of who the winners and losers are and any certain political party, because for the long term, it's the right thing to do. And I hope we kind of keep that entrepreneurial spirit going and try and move forward, because I think we can. And frankly, I think we have to. There's really no other choice at this moment.
We got to lean on each other, man. We got to work together to make it happen. I think conversations like this are great. You know, all the work that you and your team are doing, like, I mean, it's just so important. It's so great. And I'm just so grateful that you exist, honestly. I'm not trying to gas you up, but I just really, I think the world of you, and I know that you touch so many different people in a COVID-friendly way, of course. From 6 feet, or more. But you're just so tied into, like, international, national, like, all over the country. It's so important. And I think that, like, worldly and community thinking that you blend together so seamlessly, it's going to be so important. So I hope that we can continue these conversations and I can help facilitate them in some way. If you've been listening to this and you want more of these conversations, let Michael know so that we can maybe have some roundtables together so we can really come up with some solutions. And I think even just spending an hour a day thinking about other people, right? Like, if you live a life of service, then you live a life of happiness. And I truly believe that. And the best way to get out of your own head is to focus on helping somebody else out. So if we could pull all these resources, all these brains, all these great intentions that we have into something that affects some change, then I can't imagine there's anything better that we could be doing with our time than that.
I completely agree. And, one of the good side benefits of all these video calls is I realized how much I touched my face before this, and I'm working really hard. I grew out this great kind of beard, and I was really loving it. It was salt and pepper, but my wife was like, do you realize you just stroke your face all day long now? And I was like, so I had to shave it off, but it's making us more aware of that. I think what I will end with is I was looking at my Twitter bio the other day, and the last part of it says, believes in hugs. And I thought about, gosh, do I need to edit that in this moment? And I was like, no, I still believe in hugs. And we're going to get back to a point where we can hug other people. But in the moment, make sure you're hugging the people around you and yourself, because it's important. We have to take care of ourselves and each other in this moment. And if we do that, we're going to get through this. There's going to be some hard times, but there's also going to be some good times on the other side of it. And if we stay together and work together, I think we can get there.
I heard that. Well, my Facebook page says long hugger. It also says MD, but take what you want. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm of the long hug tribe. I am like, if we don't share some oxytocin, we didn't do it right. That's how I feel. I want to bond with you when I hug. And I can't wait to get back to those moments. I haven't shaved my mustache yet, but it's coming. I think we're going to see a whole new wave of body positivity and acceptance coming.
One gray hair that sticks straight out of my eyebrow. I don't know if it's visible, but I'm embracing it. I've named it.
Yeah.
His name is Buzz, and he's just with me on all my conference calls now.
Yeah, I mean, hey, man, it's, it's like when I used to go to the beauty salon before to get waxed, they would say, no pain, no gain. And, I think I'm good on any additional pain right now. So
I love it. Well, Molly, thank you again for providing this platform. If anyone out there is looking for podcast recording, getting their message out, Molly's really the best in the business, and I'm so honored to call her a friend. It was important to me that we were able to have this discussion today, and that we use the local business in having the discussion. So please show Molly some love with her platform as well. And thank you all for giving up some time to listen to this. And I hope it was helpful, and I look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate you including me in this, and thank you for the shout out. We just want to keep good conversations going, right? Like, our tagline is, podcast with a purpose, making the world a better place, like one conversation at a time. And that hasn't changed, right? Like, just how we record our sessions has changed, but our mission has not. And so I appreciate that shout out very, very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Molly. Hang in there. We'll get through this.
Yes, you too. Thank you.